So the directions for these complex numbers could simply be simplify. So now when I look at these problems, I'm just going to simplify them. What that means is I'm going to get rid of the negative underneath the square root and get it in some form of a plus bi. That's really what we're going to do here. So let's say for the first one, do you guys remember that rule we had? And I talked about it in the last video. It was negative square root of negative a equals I square root of a. So we're going to use that here first. So that means this would equal I square root 288. And from there, we can actually now simplify square root of 288. Now, I don't know if you remember this or not, but does 288 have any factors that are perfect squares? And they actually do. 144 times 2 is 288. And we know 144 is a perfect square. That's 12 times 12. And that's what a perfect square means. A number times itself, that gives me that number. And 12 times 12 is 144. So that means that this equals I square root 144 times square root of 2. We can split across multiplication the square roots. So now, since the square root of 144 is 12, I would write 12i square root 2. And that would be our final answer simplified. That's what we would be looking for. So now the next one here. Let's take a look at square root of negative 17 times square root of negative 17. Now for this one, we definitely have to take that first step always. So this would really be I square root 17. I square root 17. Now, a lot of people really screw this problem up. They just put those together and say, oh, so negative 17 times negative 17 is positive 17. I can't technically put those together underneath the same square root because they have a negative on them. It doesn't work that way. That's illegal, just so you know. So I have to write it in this form first because that gets rid of the negative underneath the square root, and that's why we need it. Now this here is really I times this times I times this, square root of 17. So what that means here is I can really say I squared times 17 squared. Now I could say 289, but I don't need to. The square root of 17 squared is those would actually cancel each other out, and I would get 17 for that. But also, this is what's more important here. It's not really more important, but it's the reason for this section. What is I squared equal to? I squared actually equals negative 1. So that's going to be a negative 1 there, and that's going to be a 17. So then my final answer for this one is negative 17. That's why we have to be careful with that pulling the I out right away. So make sure you do that because you'll miss your negatives a lot on those. Now the third one here. This one here, I'm going to have to take out the i's first. So this is going to be I square root 6 times I square root, I was just going to put a negative there, square root of 2, and then over the square root of 3. Now all I'm going to do is rearrange the top. So this is really going to be I squared, and this is really going to be square root of 12. And that's going to be over the square root of 3. I just put it all together. So now, from here, the square root of 12 has a perfect square in it. And that perfect square is 4. But I have a square root of 3 on the bottom. And when we deal with these ideas of simplifying, we can't have square roots in the bottom. So we're going to have to take this out. We're going to have to get rid of it. How do we do that? By multiplying the top and the bottom by the square root of 3. All right, so I'm going to get this I squared. Actually, instead of I squared, can I just put a negative 1 there? You guys okay with that? I'm okay with that. And then when I multiply this together now, that's going to be square root of 36. Now, the reason why I didn't take the square root of 4 out of this first was I realized there's more going on here. So it might be better just to multiply it through first. to see what happens there before we actually just simplify these radicals individually. Okay, so anyway, so then on the bottom, I'm just going to get a 3. So now we can see that the square root of 36 is actually 6. And times a negative 1 is going to be negative 6 over 3, which equals negative 2. So there's our answer for the third one. Okay, now for the last one here. This one's really interesting. Okay, this is negative 9 minus square root of negative 18 minus 3, or over 3, excuse me. So this is going to be negative 9 minus, and I'm just going to call this I square root 18 over 3. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take care of this 18 here. I'm going to simplify that, and that simply means I'm going to look for factors of 18 that are perfect squares. And it has one. It's 9 times 2. So this breaks down into a 9, into a 2, and I know the square root of 9 is 3. So it is a perfect square. So I'm just going to use those ideas here, but I'm going to rewrite it. So negative 9 minus I square root of 9 square root of 2, that's times, over 3. And the square root of 9 is 3. So now I'm just going to rewrite that again. Now the reason why I'm doing this is I want you guys to see every step here, because it's important that we don't miss one of these. I mean, would I have to write square root of 9 square root of 2 on the test? No, but get used to saying it, because this is going to be 3i square root 2 over 3. Now some of you might say, hey, let's cross those out. Wrong answer. Don't do that. What we can do, though, is we look at each term in the top, and if I see the terms in the top, I have 2 of them, because terms are separated by pluses, minuses, and equal signs. And I also have 1 on the bottom. Now, one thing I can do is I can say, hey, what number goes into all 3 of those terms? And I could see that 3 does. 3 goes into this I square root of 2 times. 3 goes into this one here 3 times. And 3 goes into this 1 time. So I can take that approach if I want to and just say, hey, so I'm going to take 3 out of all 3 of those. By division, of course, so be careful. So then if I do that, I'm going to get negative 3 here. And I'm going to get minus I root 2. And then on the bottom, I'm going to get a 1. Which then this simplifies to negative 3 minus I square root 2. So there's our last answer here. So if you kind of look around at all 4 of these, those are all of our answers for these problems. All right, there it is.